Welcome back, everyone. So far we successfully created our recipes. We stored the images and then we store the recipes in our database. So if we look at the MongoDB Atlas or Compass, whatever you have available, we can see we have a collections of recipes, but we don't have a way to access these recipes from our application UI. So that's what we're going to be working on in this video. So first of all, make sure your server is up and running, and I'm going to hide the terminal in here, and let's go to the layout file, which is the main layout of the application here where we created the navbar, and we need to create a link to, let's say we have /recipe single. We can create a new link that will go to, let's copy this one down and let's just call this one recipes, and it should go to /recipes plural, right? So recipes plural will get all the recipes, it will render all the recipes there. So now we can see the new link here. It doesn't go anywhere yet, so if we click there, we're gonna get a 404. So in order to have this route, we're gonna go back to the app folder. We're gonna right click, new folder, recipes, then right click on recipes, make sure it's plural, and we're gonna create a page.tsx file. Now here we're going to just export default async function recipes page, export default, return, let's return a diff and h1 recipes. All right, make sure we save that page, and then if we click here now to go to /recipes, we can see the h1 here. Perfect. So let's go and continue to the next step. So basically we are going to fetch all the recipes that we have in our database. So we're going to have to go back to our actions. So if we go back to actions index.tsx, in here we have a action to get a single recipe, right? We can put some space here, and we can say get single recipe by the _ID. And then we can create a new function here. So let's do export async function, and we can call this one get all recipes. This one doesn't need any parameters. We're just going to write some code in here to fetch all the different recipes that we need. All right, so let's continue back in here. So we can bring all the way this variable db, we can bring it outside, we can bring it up here, and we can remove the awaits because we're not inside of the asynchronous function. Just so that way we have just one db instance, and then here we can go ahead and use the same db to access the collection. So here, let's go and create a try catch. We can say console.log or console.error, and console log the error in here. And here, what we're gonna do, we're going to say const recipes equals await, and then we're gonna do db dot collection dot find. No, that collection, we need to pass the name of the collection, which is recipes, right? The name of the collection that we have, recipes here. and then we're gonna do a .find to get all of them, and then we need to make from that's going to just return a cursor, and then we need to turn that to an array, so we're gonna use the .toArray method to get that into a JavaScript array. Then we can have a check here if there's no recipes, if we get some errors. Fetching this in here, let's just have a throw a new error for now and say error fetching recipes from MongoDB. And if we pass that check, we can go ahead and return the recipes. So the collection, let's make sure we set the type to the collection so that way TypeScript knows what's inside of this array here. So we have the recipe type here. So what we need to do is just say this is a recipe collection. So that means that each one of those documents that we get back are going to represent a recipe, just like we declare back in here in our recipe type. Cool, I think that's everything we need to do here. So here, let's just have a little comment, return an array of recipes. All right, so let's now go back to our page, our recipes page. In here now, we need to go ahead and call this function that we just created, this server action. So let's import get all recipes, and we're going to call this function here. So we're going to say const recipes equals await get all recipes, and then we are going to map over the array and render each recipe inside of some car that we're going, or recipe car that we're going to style together. So after the h1, we can have a div, and inside of the div we can have let's just map over recipes and recipes.map, and we're gonna grab each recipe and we're going to render a recipe car, a recipe item, which is a component that we need to create. So let me make this a little bit smaller. Oops, it's not holding together. Let me hold it there. So here we're gonna call, let's go and create inside of, where's my components folder? We don't have a components folder yet. Actions, app, types, we don't. Okay, so let's create a components folder. Yeah, we can do that. So let's click all the way out here on the root folder, components folder, components, right click, new file, a recipe item or recipe car.csx. All right, so here we're gonna do export default function, recipe car, and here we're gonna return some div, and in here we're gonna have a few more elements to display everything we need from the recipe. So from the map that we're gonna do here, we're gonna map over each one of these here. So let's just have a h2 here that will say a recipe, just so we can import this component back inside of recipes. So let's say import recipe car, and we're gonna render that in here. So a recipe car, we need to set two things here. We need to set the key prop, because we're gonna have a list of recipes, and here we need to pass the recipe dot underscore ID, and we also going to pass the recipe to the component here as a prop. Format this, and here it says the object ID is not assignable to type key, so we just need to call here dot to string. It's just that the key prop needs to be a string. And now here it's saying key string recipe but ID is not assignable. Property recipe does not exist on type in string attributes. Okay, so it says that this recipe car probably is not expecting anything because we didn't declare anything here. Let's just save it, and we get it's already mapping over. So we get in the recipes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're mapping over that. It's just that we need to go back to the recipe car and declare here that we're going to receive a recipe. Save it. Right now that went away, but now we got a new error that's saying the recipe is declared, the value is never read. Binding rest it has implicitly of the type any. So we need to create a type here, so TypeScript can know what is a recipe, and basically not the recipe but the props that the component is receiving. So we need to say recipe car props, and then our recipe car props, which is this object here, is going to receive so far a recipe, which is of type recipe, and we can import that from the types here. And then we need to annotate that here. It says this is a recipe, this is the recipe car props. Save it, and all the errors are taken care of. So now we have each recipe here. Right now we're just rendering the same text here. So let's destructure some of this stuff here from the recipe. And we're gonna need the recipe, and you see how everything is displayed here because it knows the type and all the properties that the recipe is supposed to have. So let's render this right away. Recipe title, instead of just saying recipe, let's display the recipe underscore title here. There we go. We're also going to need the recipe image, and we're gonna need the underscore ID as well. All right, so we want to make each one of these, let's just style this first, and then we'll make it into a nice car, and we make it clickable as well. So we have an h2 with the title. All we're gonna need is next an image. So let's do a div, just like we did previously. We're gonna have a div, we're gonna have a image component from next image. Make sure that gets imported at the top. And here we are going to set the src to recipe image, the alt tag to recipe title. Whoops, that's not what I need to do. And then here we're getting an error because we need to set the width and the height. So here we're gonna set the width to something like 400 and the height also around there. We can play around with the bodies from there because I don't want to display it too big. So now we got the title and we got the images. You might have different images, of course, and different recipes. And what else we need to do here? So let's make sure the sizes here, let's just do it at the bottom. Keep this up there. So we also need to set sizes to 100 VW just so I can take all the space available inside of this div to make sure. And then we are going to also set the styles just like we did previously with the image at on the home page. And this is just to make sure that it takes the whole entire space, the width to 100%, and we need to set the height to also 100%. I need colon there. This is 90% width, comma, height. Missing a quote here. Cool. And that's about it. Okay, cool. So now it's taking all the space available there. All right, you can play around with the values from there. I have it at 400 and 400. You can make it smaller if you want, display it differently. Right now, I think that's fine for the moment. So to the div here, let's just say, no, we don't need anything here because we're not, I think that's fine. Let's keep it there. So let's style this a little bit closer to like a core component. And I make sure this is attached to each other here. There we go. So I can move this more freely. So let's start by, let's make this a link instead of a div. Let's make this a link, and we're gonna import next link here. Make sure it gets imported here because we want to set the href to go to, let's go backticks /recipes recipe singular. This is, we're gonna hit the route that we have the parameter ID that we created in the previous video, and we're gonna use the $ curly brackets, and here we need to pass the underscore ID. All right. So now to the link, let's add a few class names. So class name, we're gonna say flex dash call to make it a colon. Border, we're gonna say rounded. We're gonna say on hover. Okay, that was not, don't know what happened there. So let's go and say rounded on hover. Okay, we want to scale the image to just slightly bit. So let's do -105. And then we're gonna say on hover, we want to set the transition to transition on hover, because we only want to activate the transition on hover, and on hover we want to set it to ease in out, so it can kind of like gets a little bit bigger and smaller, and it gets a little bit kind of like animated. And then we're gonna say hover, and we're gonna set a delay of 150 in here. So now when we hover over this, it gets slightly bigger, and we can add a few margins around this because now it's kind of like touching each other, but it has a little bit of, it grows a little bit just to create that little animation there. So for the h2, let's just add a class name, and let's say for the recipe here, because it's touching, let's do margin left -2 to move it a little bit to the right. And then on the div here, let's do empty class name, and then a margin top dash auto. So you can push any image to the bottom to whatever space we have available there. And I think we could here. Let me see, do we need class name object dash cover? I think it's fine. Okay, 400s are fine. We might not need this. Let's keep it there because we had it before. They're pretty nice and big, so I don't think we're gonna have too much of a problem there. All right, so this is the car, right? But now we can add a little bit of, let's make this a little bit bigger. So to the page, so remember we are inside of the, this is the recipe car, which is being rendered in here, right? This is what we're mapping. So to this one, let's do a few changes here. So let's go to the div here. Let's start here. Let's do class name, padding of 10 to the h1. Class name, let's do text dash 3xl. Let's do font dash bold. Let's do font dash serif. And let's do a margin bottom of 10. All right, that looks a little bit better. On this div where we are mapping over the recipes, let's create a grid here so it can be displayed properly on different sizes, different screen sizes. So let's do grid, then a grid dash call, and then we're gonna do 1. Remember, Tailwind starts from the smaller screen, so in the smaller screen we want 1. Then we can set the gap to 4, so we can add gap between the grid. Let's see, this is grid here. I'm missing a D here. Okay, grid calls. I'm missing an S here. Come on. Grid dash calls dash 1, and then gap 4. Okay. Still touching here. Let's see. So what size is this? Is this a smaller one? Okay, I think. Let's see. Play around with that in a second. More space is needed there. So gap is 4. Let me see. Is the gap even being applied? I don't think so. What did I touch? Save it. And then put the gap back in there. Yeah, there's a gap of 4, but I think we need a little more. Let's just leave it at 5 for now. Cool. So gap is 5, and then let's do in a medium size screen. We want to do a grid dash calls dash 2. So 2 columns in medium size. There we go. And then in a large screen, we want to do a grid dash calls dash 4. So if we get into a large screen, let's make it a little bit. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4 in a large screen. In a medium screen, we got 2 columns, and in a small size, we got 1 column. All right. I think that's everything we need for the styling. Let's see what we got to do here next. Let's see. let's test to see. Let's go back home. We are at the home page. Let's go to create. We got the create form. Let's go to recipes. So now let's try to click on one of these here. When we click on this, all right, we got taken over to, let's look at the path here. We got a recipe singular and then the ID that we are looking for. We can go back to recipes. We in a larger screen, so it looks, see how nicer it looks here? It looks way nicer, but because it's a larger screen. If it's a medium screen, we get 2, which is also nice. It looks a little bit bigger here, but on a phone, I think it would look pretty nice. All right, so if we click on any of these here, we get taken to the page, and this is also responsive here. Cool. I think this is fine. This is what we need. Now we at the moment we can see all the recipes. We can click on each recipe. We get taken to the page, and we can see the instructions, ingredients, and everything, all the details about the recipe. Lastly, let's do, at least for this video, let's do on these, when we go here, so the user doesn't have to click back to recipes, click on another recipe, click back here. We need to make it a little bit more user friendly, so let's go back to this page here, and at the top here somewhere, right on top of the recipe title, we could add something else. I don't think it's not too necessary. Let's say go back to all recipes. Oops. And then here we can make this font dash LG. No, text dash LG. And then font dash, we can say medium, not medium, just keep it light, maybe light, there you go. And then we can add a little bit of margin bottom -5. All right, so actually this is not a div. It looks nice, right? But we need to make it clickable because it's going to take us back to /recipes. So we need to make this a link, and we import in link from next link here. Make sure it's at the top. All we need to do here, back inside it, back in the link, we just need to set the href back to, this could be just /recipes. All right, I think it needs a little bit more space, so let's do 10. 15. Is it moving? Not moving at all. Let's see. Home, recipes. Click on the recipe and go back to recipes. Okay. Let's see. Margin bottom dash 48. Is this being added? No, I don't think this is working. Let's do margin tab dash 10 here. All right, that's fine. We can do it there. So we can also say on hover, we can say here on the, go back to our recipes, we can say hover. We can make this underline. So you can go like this. That's fine. Also, I think we should add that to the navigation bar too. So we can go back to the layout, and in here we can just add it here. We can say to each one of these links, and let's do, I'm gonna highlight all of these here. So I'm gonna hit Control D to select all of these, and then I'm gonna go back here. Let's say class name hover underline. Cool, that's fine. Quick fix. Now this navigation is getting a little bit bigger, so I will later probably just make this a separate component and then just import it back in here. But for now, we're just gonna keep it there. So that's it. Now we have a new page, recipes, where we're fetching other recipes that we have in our database. We created a simple recipe card with a little bit of animation on hover, click on it, and we get taken to each recipe page so we can see all the details. We can go back to other recipes, and that's it. We're done with this one. So I'll see you in the next video.